if you want to see the fullest form of indigenous Punjabi Christianity, that you find in the Punjabi Psalms, and there's nothing else.
You are listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, a podcast that presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome back to Our Urban Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Alphonse Javed. Today I'm joined by Yousaf Sadiq, a fellow Pakistani Christian. Longtime listeners will probably remember our South Asian episodes about cricket and dance, including the Punjabi Bhangra. Today, we will be talking about the unique Pakistani Punjabi Christian perspective of the Psalms. Yousaf and I will be talking about his book, a pioneer work that encompasses the cultural, social, historical, missional, and sociolinguistic aspects of the Punjabi psalter. In case you don't know, Punjabi is one of a number of ethnicities and languages in Pakistan that extends across the border up to India. For the majority of Christians in Pakistan that are Punjabi, singing the Psalms is part of everyday life, and I'm excited to share their importance with you all. Dr. Sadiq earned his doctorate from London School of Theology, UK. He is the author of the Contextualized Psalms, Punjabi Zabur, a precious heritage of the global Punjabi Christian community. He teaches at Wheaton College in Illinois and enjoys watching cricket. Thanks for joining us today, Yousaf. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start. I have not done this ever before, so I want to try. क्या हाल चाल है? सब ठीक है? खैरियत है?
खुदा का शुक्र है. आप कैसे हैं?
बिल्कुल ठीक. Amen. Okay, so now we got that out of the way. Now you know we are natives and we can speak the language. We're going to get into basically what we did is just greeted each other, and I asked him, how is he doing? And he said, by the grace of Jesus, he is well. So now we're going to get into conversation. So before we start, let me ask you about your family. And this is not something I'm just doing with you. I do that with every guest I have. And the idea is very simple. I want my audience to know the guests personally. I want to build that connection. When they know you, they understand that you are a human, you are a real person who is doing some work. Sometimes that work is difficult work. So that's my reason why I do this. So share a little bit about your family before we get into the further conversation.
Sure. I'm glad you asked about family. The family is very important, especially in South Asian context where we come from. So there's nothing better than starting with family. I'm married to Ruth, my wife. She's also from Pakistan. And I have two daughters, Abigail and Ileana, ages 8 and 4. And I'm enjoying being a dad and husband. And when we think about family, it's just not the immediate family that often we think about. I think that's the difference often in South Asian cultures and Western cultures is family is extended family is also part of your family. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, my siblings, my mom, all of them are in Pakistan.
Yeah. Wow. So you are the only one who is here with your wife and children. Is that right?
Correct.
Wow, that's actually that's my story too. But in my case, my wife is from here, mm-hmm. and we did not meet in a college. Often people talk about like, oh, I met her in college. No, we didn't. We met at a Christian camp, and I have 4 children. My daughters, I have 2 daughters too, twin daughters. They are 2, but I have 2 boys too. My older boy is 6, and then 4, and then my girls. But you're right. Extended family is incredibly important. It's a nuclear family system. And yes, everybody's there. Mom and dad come. They have their green card, so they come every year to just spend a little time with us. But otherwise, that's the same story here too. To start us off, can you tell us more about your journey from Pakistan to the United Kingdom to the US and to writing the book.
Sure. So yeah, I was born in Pakistan, Karachi, the largest city in Pakistan. Um, and pretty much like many of the Pakistani Christians, first in my family, like first generation going to school. Um, and I always was curious about like why we sing the Psalms in Punjabi. So I would go to church, and what I listen to is the Psalms in Punjabi. Whenever there's a social or cultural gathering of the believers, what you hear is the Psalms in Punjabi. It was very common in my family, and I'm sure for many Pakistani Christian families as well, to be listening to the Psalms in Punjabi before going to school or getting ready for work. It was like pretty much part of me. And I was very curious to know the history of the Psalms, like where do they come from? So in a way, it was an attempt to find my own roots, like who I am as a Punjabi Christian and why Punjabi Psalms are so much crucial part of me. And this was this particular interest that took me to the UK at the London School of Theology, where I did my research on the Psalms in Punjabi. And then there was an opportunity to teach at Wheaton College, which then took me to the United States. So that's briefly Pakistan, UK, US.
Wow. So please tell us and our listeners what the Zabur is and share some thoughts about its history.
Yeah, so Zabur is an Arabic word. It is the same word which is also used by Muslims all over the world with reference to the Psalms of David. So Christians living as a religious minority in a Muslim majority context also make use of the same term in reference to the biblical Psalms that we know. So, I mean, in fact, we actually have two different words. The Catholic translation used the mizmor or mazamir, which is more closely to the Hebrew transliteration. Whereas for the Protestant Church, the very common word for the Psalms is the Zabur. So Zabur, when we say Zabur, it's primarily the Psalms of David or the biblical Psalms that we are talking about.
Yeah.
As I've mentioned briefly, that I was very curious to know my own roots, like why Psalms make so important part of the Christian life in Pakistan. I started digging into the history of the Psalms, and just to answer like the history briefly, they were primarily translated by the United Presbyterian missionaries in the region of Sialkot in Pakistan, which is also known as the hub of Christian missions in South Asia, especially the Sialkot Convention and everything. So this was an attempt to meet the needs of the local Christians. They were primarily, many were having no access to education. Their social and cultural sort of setting was pretty much underprivileged. So it was an attempt from the Western missionaries to come up with something that will attract the Christians, the local Christians, especially in an oral culture. So what they found was that poetry was pretty much loved by these people, and they loved to sing in their own language and in their using their own musical systems. However, they started with the Urdu translation of the Psalms, which interestingly did not work really well. They spent 10 years working on this particular project, but to the local Christians, it was not really embraced because they did not sing in the Western style. It was not their language. So for this particular Urdu translation of the Psalms, they used the Urdu language, and the Psalms were set to Western melodies. So primarily did not work. Well, even to this day, I think if you ask many Pakistani Christians if they have actually seen or have heard of the Urdu Zaburs, many would say, well, we do not know. We only know the Punjabi Zaburs. And the reason was because it did not connect with the Punjabi Christians. And then after 10 years, they translated the Psalms into Punjabi, which the difference was now they were using the mother tongue, and they also were using the indigenous music, which really connected with the Punjabi Christians. And it was like, yes, this is how we sing. This is our language. It was not a foreign sort of thing for them. So, for example, some writers like Jeffrey Cox, he mentions that if you want to see the fullest form of indigenous Punjabi Christianity, that you find in the Punjabi Psalms, and there's nothing else. So I would say it's for those reasons the Psalms became very popular. They were accepted by the Punjabi Christians. Yeah, so it's like briefly, I think we can go in more detail about the history, but it's a very brief to say how we got the Psalms.
This is interesting because my dad is a pastor back in Pakistan. Of course, we are Punjabi. I'm from Lahore, Punjab. So that's our mother tongue too. So never heard about it. So, and first, I'd never heard about Urdu. I often actually wondered because I lived in Greece. So I heard Greek songs, English songs, American songs translated into Greek, but on that tune. Even the hymns we sing here in the United States were sung over there, and even in Egypt they were singing the same ones, but with the American tone that we have. And I always wonder why we don't. Now, the first time I'm realizing that why not, because I was like, everywhere I go, I went, in Albania, they were doing the same thing. In Mongolia, they were doing the same thing. I'm hearing this everywhere. I was in other Eastern European countries with different languages. They're using the same tone, melodies, same, but yet we can recognize. But I always wonder why we don't have that in Pakistan. So now, first time I became aware that, it was done, but it didn't connect. Do you know any of the songs? I mean, any of the hymns in that melody personally?
No, actually, if you look at the Sialkot Convention hymn book, Zabur ki Kitab, there is some, I guess it's Psalm 19 and 119. There are at least 2 Psalms in that book that are Urdu. And you wonder, like, what are these Urdu Psalms are doing in the list of all these Punjabi Zaburs? The reason is that 1 or 2 Psalms became probably popular, or somehow they got placed, and that is why they were included in the Punjabi Zaburs. But we have to understand the history, like where do they come from? For example, I think it's the Fahm ata kar mujhko khudaya. So that particular Zabur in the hymn book is coming from these Urdu Psalms, but majority of the Psalms, I mean, people do not know, but at least 1 or 2 we know, and it's because they are coming from this early translation of the Urdu Psalms. I personally have only seen Psalm 101 to 150 of the Urdu translation, and it's actually a sort of like very rare sort of materials you won't find it, but I have seen some. But I think to answer your question, like why we see like in other places there is still pretty much the local language and the Western melodies, and I think Punjabi is the only example where we have, and it's very unique, that we have all 150 Psalms divided into 450 or so different sections, and every single of the section or the psalm is not only in the Punjabi language, but it also set to indigenous local Indian ragas. And I think the reason is because Punjabis kind of like rejected this Western form of Christianity, whereas the many other examples that you're saying. For example, the Korean church also make use a lot of the Psalms, and they also have 150 Psalms in Korean language. But when they sing, the language is Korean, but the melodies are still Western. So in that regard, Punjabi is very, very unique. That it's the fullest, again, the fullest form of indigenous Christianity that you're going to find. It's through the Punjabi Zaburs.
That's so incredible. So incredible. So is there any place, I know that I'm asking, I'm so interested now in this. I'm invested actually now. So is there any place that I can find the melody? I'm very interested in finding the melody for if there's anybody out there who has the melody.
For the Urdu?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because we don't use them in our churches. So apart from like one or two that are in the hymn book, otherwise, I don't think so.
Do you think it could have been the same as when we look at our hymnals, right? So I'm right here, I'm looking on the back, I got the hymnal right there, Western melodies. Do you think it could have been the same thing, that they must have used the same melody that we have? Because I'm trying to look at, okay, if every other country, every other language is using the same melody that we have here in the West, then it must have been the same melody in those. But I don't know, because there's nothing.
I think for the Urdu Psalms, we could possibly say yes, because here we are not directly. It's not the sort of like the purest form like the Punjabi Psalms here we are talking about. The first project, I think, because the focus is not necessarily indigenous music, therefore I think we can easily assume that because the focus is the Western melodies, so there must be the concentration must be that we use the Western melodies. Now, I think some of the hymns that we sing in the churches in Pakistan, you can just listening to the melodies can say, well, that doesn't sound like the Indian raga sort of melody. It's very Western. So yeah, I would definitely agree to this, that the Urdu project would must have used these Western melodies.
Yeah, and I have one example, actually. I always thought about this when first time I heard. So my first experience with the Western Christianity was in Greece. Well, again, it was an American school too. And when they sung, and here, you will hear that, because the audience, you can recognize this tone. Jalal, Jalal, Hallelujah. Jalal, Jalal, Hallelujah. So when I first time heard that, that's like a Western melody, and there's a Western song, hymn, and they just took that and turned it into that. I was like, oh, I can sing. And I was just singing. I didn't know the word in English at that time, so I just sung that. So we do have like these snippets that we can kind of like put them together, whether that's looking at the overall linguistic behavior of different hymns, production in different countries, and compare that with ours and say, well, it must have been that, even though we don't have literally anything. But then we see this kind of songs where one or two of those things, like, oh, we still have that here. That's so fascinating.
I think the only example that we can find in the Punjabi Psalms, like one of those examples would be Psalm 95, Yehovah Rajab Karda Hai. And that tune is actually Auld Lang Syne tune. So I think the first time I heard this tune was in England. I was attending like this British proms in the summer. And at the end of the proms, everybody stood and they started singing Auld Lang Syne. And I said to my friend, hey, they're singing my Punjabi Psalm 95, Yehovah Rajab Karda. He said, no. This is very nationalist, sort of a Scottish tune. So I was like, okay, now I realize, because part of the preparation of the Punjabi Psalms, the Scottish Presbyterians were also helping with that. So this is the only psalm, and they often say, if you want to experience Scotland in Pakistan, go to any Pakistani church, and you would hear this very national sort of Scottish tune, which is Auld Lang Syne.
That must have been the one. I'm sorry, forgive me. The one I sung, that's wrong. The one you are pointing, that's the right one. Okay, that's the one then. I'm so far away from my own culture, so I have not done those so long. But you're right, that was the one.
Very rare example. I mean, it's a very rare example, but majority of the
You're right,
Psalms,
that's
as
the
you
example.
know, these are like all Indian classical ragas. So
Yeah. So
but
what
it's
is the
interesting.
Zabur's significance in Punjabi church services, weddings, and funerals?
Yeah, so if you notice, I think one of the beauty of the Punjabi Psalms is that these are not limited to one particular church or denomination.
Hmm.
These are beyond denominational affiliations, these Punjabi Psalms. So you go to a Catholic church, what you sing is pretty much the Punjabi Psalms, apart from like Urdu hymns as well. You go to an Anglican church, you go to a Baptist church, you go to a Presbyterian church, you go to a Pentecostal church. All of these churches are making use of these Psalms. So for us, these Psalms are very important in our context because the idea of like brotherhood and bringing us together as a very strong form of unity for us is the Punjabi Psalm, number one. The other thing is our services often start with the singing of the Psalms. For example, Psalm 24, Rab Khudaund Badshah Hai is often the first Psalm, or Psalm 122. When they said unto me, let us go to the house of the Lord.
Hmm.
So these are the Psalms like which helps play a big role in the liturgy. If we have to look at them from that sense, often the closing Psalm is Psalm 72. May his name remain forever.
Rahega naam sada tikar. But that's the song for offering. That's when you
That's
collect the
also the
offering.
offering. This is also the offering. But often it could also be, but you see, like now you're saying that this particular psalm is for a particular purpose, right? So
Yeah.
it means that it plays a huge role in how you conduct your church services. And that's again, here we're talking about beyond denominational services. Well, it's good. You know, some people are late to church and they stand like outside the church boundary. As soon as they listen to like this psalm, Rahega na Sadatika, they know this is the offering psalm. Maybe let's go to in the church because it's the service is about to finish. But it's interesting, like you realize immediately you said, well, that's the offering psalm. And that is exactly what I'm trying to say, that it plays a huge role in our services. The other thing, so when weddings happen, and especially for my own experience, for my own wedding, like you need the musical band to play the local folk tunes as well as some like popular Bollywood tunes when people get married. So when I went to this band, it was a local, and I said, you know, they soon found that I was Christian. So I said, "Are you Christian?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you want us to play Rahe Kana Sadatikar and Rakudan Badshah Hai, like Psalm 24 and Psalm 72?" I was like, "How do you know these Psalms?" Because my understanding is that you are not Christians. You're belonging to the majority, community. You're Muslims. They say, yes, we are Muslims, but many of the people we try to play for are Christians because there are many Christians who live in the area. So for the sake of from like marketing business sort of view, we have actually learned many of the Psalms so that when Christians come to us, we can offer them because these Psalms are important to them. And that was very fascinating to know that here we are talking about musical groups, people who are very much into local folk sort of music in Pakistan, who also know these Psalms and who also realize that how important these Psalms are for the Christian community. So I have seen like, some Christian families might resist to the idea of the Bollywood melodies being played for their marriages. So they would say, well, now we have at least alternative. And the alternative is bring these people and they're going to play the Punjabi Psalm on your wedding. And that's what happened on my wedding. So to see that cultural use of the Psalms, which is now beyond the church boundaries, is also very fascinating. Funerals, I think often, if you have observed the funerals, one of the Psalms that we sing in graveyards as a form of mourning is Psalm 20. May the Lord listen to you in times of trouble. Right? Dukhan de vele teri Yahweh sunedu. So I mean, we can think for several examples of psalms that play a role in our liturgy, in our when we get together in times of happiness as a community, when we get together times of troubles and mourning and sadness. What really brings us together? Because if if we have to look at it like from a denominational point of view, maybe you may be singing certain hymns in your denomination in Urdu, for example, that the other denomination may not necessarily know. They may not even know the tune, but everybody knows the Psalms in Punjabi. And especially for our older generations, who have learned these Psalms right from the beginning and who may not necessarily have the opportunity to go to school. So again, I think as a community, this serves a bigger purpose that when we get together, we know that all of us can sing the Psalms and in our own language and in our own music.
Yeah, I agree. And I just went through, I've been praying for, this is a Lent season. So often, even though I'm a Baptist preacher, so I'm not liturgical. This is not a liturgical church. But because I come from Pakistan, so my family, they are Pentecostal. And what they do is during this season, they have healthy understanding of fasting. So they fast. And I have this like habitual thing, but also a spiritual clarity on hymns. But during this time, for no reason, because I grew up in that culture, I sing. I found myself just recently singing Dukhan de Vele the same way, because when my soul is in deep sorrow, it just comes out. Same thing. There was another, and now I can't recall, but certain hymns will come back to my mind, and I will just meditate on those hymns. You were talking about Muslims being able to, especially musically talented people are taking that, even though it's a marketing thing, but at the same time, they are catering to their audience the way anyone would. And I understand from my experience in Pakistan, many of the top Christian albums are sung by many of the top Muslim musicians and singers. But with that whole context, we can talk a little more about that. In Pakistan, we have another issue going on. We Christians deal with severe persecution and discrimination on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
So given the fact that we have Muslims who want to be there for Christians and work with Christians, and there is a collaboration happening because it's still a community, right? But then yet we have this issue of persecution and discrimination on a day-to-day basis, often living in a abject poverty.
Mm.
How does singing, that's my question, how does singing the whole canon of Psalms, including the Imprecatory Psalms that ask for revenge or justice, being comfort and hope?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a very important question, because well, you asked especially in the context of Christians and Muslims in Pakistan, but in my own observation, even the church is also struggling with these imprecatory psalms, because, like, how do we make sense of this? The psalm where the psalmist is talking about the revenge against the children of your enemies. Is asking God to to kill my enemies and so on. And I think this probably is not necessarily the case for the church in Pakistan when they sing these imprecatory psalms. And I would say that it's more of like the exegetical matter, rather than taking it like on a literal sort of understanding who these enemies are that the psalmist is talking about. I mean, it's not necessarily in the physical form, like these humans who are enemies, but it's likely that in many of these contexts, it's just looking at these enemies like in the spiritual realms, that these are the enemies who are going against them, against the people of God. So imprecatory psalms, we still make a lot, sing a lot of imprecatory psalms, because we also have to understand that it was not necessarily the church who started learning these psalms. They were not being taught about the meaning first, but actually they learned the memorization part happened before. Yeah, we do have these psalms that are pretty much used, and I would say that believers often do not look at those who persecute them as their enemies in that context, but it's these enemies are in the spiritual sense, I would say. But regardless of that, I would say that all Christians, no matter where they are, imprecatory psalms is not an easy one to do with.
Yeah, I agree. I think I never thought this way before in my mind, because the persecution is so real. You're not asking for, maybe as part of being Christian in that context, you are not looking for revenge or for justice. You're rather looking for comfort and relief.
Right.
You focus on, God, get me through this. God, get me through this painful situation. It's not like, okay, hit my enemies really hard so they never come back. It's more of give me enough strength to get through today so I can be alive tomorrow.
Right.
I agree. I never thought this way again before, because when I look at Psalms, often I go to Psalms, even here in the United States, and it's not different. Anytime I am dealing with the fear, or I'm dealing with the pain, or dealing with stress or depressive thoughts or those kind of things, it brings relief. Every time I counsel people, that's what I do. I tell, like, hey, look through the Psalms, read through the Psalms. But that's an interesting thought, that why we don't, even though we see David doing it. He will ask God to take his enemies out. But we don't. So since you are a theologian, I'm going to get off this Psalms conversation and just ask you, why not? Why don't we do that? Why don't we ask God to do that? Why?
No, I think we are ambassadors of peace, right? So, like revenge and hatred is not, what is our calling or mandate as Christians. We are to look for reconciliation, love, peace. This is our calling. So again, I agree with you that many Christians would definitely raise this question, even in the West, is like, what is the purpose of this imprecatory psalms? But I think I agree with you that this is to help us process, the situation that you're going through, as well as to look at, like, I think primarily what the psalmist is doing is he is inviting God, urging God to take some sort of like action. But is his own, like, this is his whole intention is not really the enemies. It's actually the urging God to do something about the situation.
Again, great point. You're right. And now I'm reflecting on, because my dad's church was under attack constantly. And I remember doing the same thing, where we will, use hymns that talk about rise up, God, defend me, those kind of thing. But defend me not in like a sense that now there's going to be, somehow angels going to show up and start hitting people. But it was more of like, God can, as the scripture teaches, they can come through one way to attack you, but they will disperse in 7 different ways. So that kind of idea was always part of my, my upbringing, that you just cause God, plead to him to rise up, stand up, take a stand. But at the same time, it's also deal with my grief. This intro introspection while at the same time leaning on God for um, his justice, but not justice as go kill them, but justice as like
Mhm.
bring restoration, bring what I don't even know what I was asking for. Now I'm reflecting on this. Yes, I think the reason is, as you said, we are ambassador of peace. Deep down, we are ambassador of peace. We'd rather give our lives than have God take somebody's life, or God forbid, dare to take somebody's life because we think that's a godly thing to do. So you're right. It comes from there. One of the things that you have written about is how the Psalms could be a bridge between Muslims and Christians. So we're talking about persecution, we're talking about real
Yeah.
discrimination. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I briefly touched on this point. And again, I think anything we do, because we live in Muslim majority context, you always want to think about like how the church engages with the majority community. And here primarily, I was looking at this, the reality of the oral culture, the love for poetry, and the love for poetry in the mother tongue. And then this material of the mystic or the um, Sufi side, which is in the Punjabi language, which is also in poetic form. So here I was like trying to look at some of the ideas. So, for example, some of the Punjabi uh, poets or Sufis would look at this idea of tasting God. Okay, so tasting God. So when you think of tasting God, you also look at the Psalms. Well, Psalms talks about tasting God, taste and see that the Lord is good.
Mm.
So this idea of like tasting God, and again this idea that you you need to have the like you have to try for yourself in order to see. You don't rely on somebody else to help you taste God. You have to taste God for yourself. So some of these ideas that I found in some of these Punjabi Sufi poetry, I was like, have they actually read the Psalms? That was like my first impression. How are they coming up with such ideas that are we actually find in the Psalms? Um, so my interest was to see that cultural availability of that material, which also kind of like points to these mystic ideas which we find in the Psalms, in order to look at, well, there is some similarity, there is some sort of bridge building that possibly could happen because Psalms are poetry. And for example, Bulleh Shah or other people's poetry is also in the Punjabi language. And if they're touching on some of these ideas which the psalmist is doing, then I think we definitely have a clear opportunity to engage with the wider community using this like cultural similarity and significance of poetry and language.
That's incredible. Um, and I see that now. I can see that, especially when you go to the Data Darbar or any of those places. Those kawals are sitting there. What they are doing is they are taking the word. Some of these, by the way, I don't know how many Muslims know this, but some of these poetries or Sufi kalam is
Mhm.
coming from people who lived really bad life. They were not like it seems like that they must have been like right there up with God. And a lot of time they are using that kalam or that description to talk about their lost love because they didn't get the girl they wanted. Now they are falling in they are in pain. So they are crying out before God that I'm in pain. And there's this, you can even see that in some of those kalams. They will show that my love for my darling is as if your love for me. And how can I worship you? Like those kind of like crazy ideas, but but such a beautiful, it exalts the love, human love. But the idea over there is like, I am in pain, but I want to focus on your love. Um, it's amazing.
Mhm.
It's amazing. One of my, so I don't know if it's a Punjabi hymn or I don't know how I came across, but many years ago, many years ago, my older brother who's a pastor in Pakistan, and he sings with I don't know if you're familiar with Masih. He is a Pakistani Punjabi gospel singer, basically, from the old days. And he works with him, his disciple and all that. So he went to OM Operation Mobilization trip to Murray, and he came back with this gift from the Lord. Before, he was not able to play any instrument, and suddenly he was able to play. And the song he brought back became kind of like my song for the rest of my life. And as we were talking, it came to my mind, and I wonder if you know this. मैं अपने ना दे आशिक नू आपी बचावांगा ओ मेरा नाम पछाणदा है ओनू छुड़ावांगा. I don't know where it comes from, but that often, whenever I'm in trouble here, even, and I don't, before where I am now, Central New Jersey, Metuchen. I was in New York. I moved here a year and a half ago, from New York. And over there, my church was predominantly white church, so I had no Punjabi or Urdu speaking person around me. But yet this will come to me. I don't know why. I will just sing that. What does it mean to say that the Psalms are contextualized? Would contextualizing the epistle look different from that?
Yeah. I think when we say contextualization, the big word is context, your own setting. And this word, we could use it in like different sense. Often in Bible translation, for example, often you hear the term contextualization. It's like how the text kind of like make sense to the people in their own language and culture. So what you're trying to do is that, of course, the text is written in a different context, right? And there's a time period also, like long time ago, this has been written. So the idea is like how you can break those sort of like barriers, so the word communicates to the minds and hearts of the people who are listening to it. And you're doing all this because you want to convey or communicate the message to the best that you could possibly do. So that, again, the idea is that it connects with the people. So that's what we mean when we say like contextualization of the Psalms, is that here we are talking about language. So let's think about like, if you give the text or the Psalms in a language which is foreign to people, which they may like struggle to understand. And again, we are trying to overcome hurdles as much as possible. So language is, of course, number one thing that we think about. Again, for the Psalms, we are thinking about the local melodies. Again, we are trying to eliminate anything which is foreign, which is strange. I think the more we, if we are going to bring in many of these hurdles, then our brains are going to get this pressure, like they're not going to process easily. So we are trying to eliminate those things so that our brain could easily understand and easily process those things. And so language, indigenous music, I would say, and even the terms and idioms and phrases that have been used in the Psalms are pretty much in the local setting. So that is what we mean by contextualization. Of course, I mean, one example that comes to mind, and this is not necessarily the Psalms, but in South Asian context, for example, Sadhu Sundar Singh. He's converted through the ministry of the Western missionaries, but his approach to evangelism was very different. He believes, so his famous saying is that India is not Christian because Indians have not been given the gospel in an Indian bowl, but they have been given Christianity in a Western cup. That is why our people do not recognize it. So again, it's like, how are people going to recognize like who is Christ and what is Christianity? So that's an example of what we mean when we say contextualization, is like presenting things to people that connects with their hearts and with their minds, and you remove every element which is foreign in the process. So that's contextualization of the Psalms. But your question is how like would the contextualization of epistles, would they look like different?
Right.
They may look different. I think one big the difference is the poetic form. The Psalms are in poetic form, so they really fits in an oral culture where people love and sing. Epistle may also be done in a similar manner. So, for example, I know Joshua Fazl-Din was a scholar who translated the gospel in poetic form. In fact, he attempted to translate the entire New Testament in poetic form. And the reason, because again, you can read the scripture, but in a culture where there's so much love for poetry, you would see that people want to memorize and recite the poetry. So I guess like the epistle could also work really well. Entire, like any part of the scripture in poetic form can be very effective in oral cultures. But yeah, you have to see, I mean, like it depends on what context we are talking about. If anything culturally, if it really connects with people, I think that should be the approach. So that might look like the contextualization different depending on different contexts. But I think for anything like this, every effort should be made to ease the process so that scripture, so the text could connect easily with the people and they can realize it like, yeah, this is my life experience. This actually connects with me because it matches with my surrounding. I can understand it in a better way. So like overall, that's what we mean when we say contextualization.
Yeah, and I think that's might have been the reason why we have a Quran in Arabic, and it's easy to even people, if they're not able to know what it says and what it is, even in Urdu language, I mean Urdu speaking people or Bengali speaking people, Muslims, Indonesian speaking communities, they don't understand, but they can recite. The recitation is because it's rhythmic, and same thing with Hebrews, they do the same thing, they recite. Perhaps that's the big, I would say, disadvantage of letting go of the oral culture and not having those things, the New Testament in rhythmic style, for at least for cultures like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or places that still love the poetry and melody.
I think you touched on a very important area, which I always am like really interested in, and that is the significance of the original languages in our context. So, I mean, all of these examples that you give of Arabic is because it's the foremost thing is the significance of the original languages, much more important than the local languages. In our context, especially like South Asian context, you look at like Hinduism, and often it's the significance of Sanskrit is much more important than any local language that you may be speaking. In the same way, for Gurmukhi, Punjabi for the Sikhs is significant, no matter as a Sikh, of course, you speak Punjabi, but even if you're speaking any other language, there is no comparison with the language, which is the language of the text. And at least I think for the Christian church, the good thing is that we are not bound to be reciting the Christian scripture in like, Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic. But sometimes I think, especially for us, like as South Asian Christians, we should not be taking this like for granted. In our context, if we see that the original language are so important, I think as a Christian church in South Asia, this is one of our big need, is also to engage with the community, the larger community, through the original languages. So like if you recite something from the Quran as a Muslim, and when you translate it to me and you say, this is what it say, I got to trust you because you're using a language which is considered to be sacred, and you are using a language, and sometimes it's also psychological, especially in South Asian context. if you talk to me and I struggle to understand what you're trying to say, I would really want to give attention to you, because it's beyond my understanding. So often this also works, especially with, it makes like everything authentic, because you're using a particular language which has this understanding of revealed or inspired. And I think if I say something in Hebrew or Greek to in that context, and then translate into Urdu or local language, like this is what Jesus said, I think in the ears of the listener is like, well, I got to be very serious here, because this person is using the real words of Jesus that he actually said. Now, it doesn't matter if he or she understands, but you would see the level of interest and the level of attention is totally different, because now you are engaging with this sacred text, and that is important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm thinking about this even in my teaching. I have a deep love for Greek, obviously, because I live there. So that's one of the top reasons. I don't use much Hebrew, and usually because I'm going through, since I've been teaching here regularly, I've been going through letters. So I don't have much need of Hebrew. But you're right. Even when I use that, the hearer, even here in the United States, I see the expression. And then I learn so much too, because I did not know that until I look at the original language and the syntax and the grammar structure and all that. I was like, oh, that's amazing, because translation failed to bring this together, because they can't translate one word. They need a description, and they can't just go outside of like certain amount of words. But at the same time, you're right. It does bring some seriousness to text. But here's what I also appreciate, that it brings desire in the audience heart to learn a language. The reason why I had the desire to learn a language, because my mentor was Greek, and he will speak. He will just quote certain texts and tell me like, no, that's wrong. That's not supposed to be this. Supposed to be this. I was like, oh, I want to learn Greek now.
Right.
Because it's much much deeper. It has more rich flavor to it. So I agree. I hope and pray that people like you and me, who have been blessed to be in schools here and are in academia and able to see this need, somehow influence our pastors in Pakistan, who are often more interested in something else than learning and investing time in learning languages.
Sure.
And even
Yeah.
generally just the Bible education. We
Correct.
lack that too.
Yeah, and taking off from there, I am currently working on a selection of the Punjabi Zaburs and comparing them with the text of the Biblical Hebrew Psalms, and seeing that how idioms and phrases and metaphors from the Hebrew were translated into Punjabi. And that is just an exercise to encourage young Pakistani Christians that there is a whole scope of scholarship and research in this area where we can, one thing that this would do is, as you had said, like this is going to create an interest among the young Pakistani Christians is, okay, because text is important in our context, here is an example of how we can engage with the text. And the other thing is, of course, this accusation of the text has been corrupted, the Christian has been, the text has been changed and so on. This exercise will also encourage us to think at like, to what extent this is just to present to the wider community, to the majority community, that now here we are dealing with the text and see how faithful transmission of the text has been. Right. And here we are taking the Punjabi Psalms as an example. So I'm currently working on this, and I think, but maybe at another time we may be having a different conversation about the linguistic analysis of the Punjabi Psalms from the principles of translation.
That's excellent, man. That's awesome. I think that's what this generation needs to do to help the generation that was before us. My dad, he went to Gujranwala Bible College, and in those days you got 1 year of Bible college, and you work with a senior pastor for 7-8 years, and then you become a pastor. Now it's so terrible. In my recent encounters, everybody, even like I got this email from Brooklyn Tabernacle in New York, a good friend of mine. He sent an email. He said, "Hey, such and such a person is a pastor, and they're looking for support." I was like, "Oh," and this was a kid. A kid is not even high school yet. I think he was like a Pakistani high school. He was, I think, 8th grade or something, and he is a pastor, and he got a bunch of children with him, and he is like, oh, so and so director of this and this, and it's like, what in the world we're gonna expand the gospel and train our people? I'm all for excitement, and I'm all for like evangelistic work, but if you have no knowledge, you have not been gotten like forget about the Bible knowledge. I'm talking like you are not even knowledgeable of the world, how you are going to deal with the bigger issues of the Bible. I think it's a whole conversation that needs to be
Sure.
taking place. So I agree with you, brother. God bless you. But another topic let me take you to that one. Another topic you have written about is the South Asian perspective of Jesus's encounter with the woman at the well. Would you share a bit about the perspective so our primarily American audience could hear about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote this article for um, the missiology journal, and I think it's very normal for us when we are reading the Bible. Our upbringing, our experiences, our backgrounds, they kind of like shape our understanding of the text, because we are often trying to relate the text to like how it relates to my experience, okay, what it means to me, how the text is speaking to me. So I tried to, when I read the story in the Gospel of John chapter 4, I was like, okay, I want to put this story in the context of like South Asian strict, for example, like tribal cultural setting. And I'm just like envisioning in this sort of context, knowing like, karokari sort of practice, the honor killing sort of thing. And many of these killings happen because there is that gender dynamics. So opposite, like how you are dealing or how you are communicating or interacting with the opposite gender in South Asian context. So I was like, okay, if this is in a strict sort of like tribal South Asian setting, and Jesus is engaging with this woman, and he's talking to her, that could have like many serious sort of outcomes, because in a shame honor culture, you have to be very, very careful how you interact with a woman that you do not know, who is a stranger. And as a man, there are kind of like cultural lines, what you can and what you cannot, and those could be like serious lines. And I think the disciples realized this, in a Jewish cultural setting of the first century. I think they knew that this was strange. One, that Jesus is talking to a Samaritan, but that's everybody knows. But I think it's more that they were also very surprised that Jesus was talking to a woman, because in the first century, any rabbi would never ever talk to a woman in public. That was rule. So now they're looking at Jesus as rabbi, who is now kind of like breaking his own rule as a rabbi. In the first century Judaism, a rabbi would not even talk to his wife, even if he sees her in the marketplace. They would just pass by as strangers, and which I think, even like, growing up in South Asia, I have like experienced some of that. If I've seen like, some of my cousins, especially young female cousins, if I see them like in the marketplace, I do not necessarily stop to say them hello, just because how there are so many people around who are looking, and they may be like thinking of all sorts of things, like why, who is she, and we know this guy, and what is their relationship, and so on. You wait till they get to your home, and then you talk to them. So in the same manner, I was like, okay, geez, what is Jesus doing here? And then I kind of like started thinking of possible outcomes, like punishments for um, possibly engaging with the opposite gender in shame-based culture. Jesus could have been like stoned to death. This woman could have been stoned to death. Jesus is risking actually his life again in South Asian context. There could be like he could be beaten by the village community, like our honor. This woman is carrying our honor as a community, and you are ruining this honor of ours by as a stranger man who is coming in and engaging, and this is our territories. And so there are, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. So there could be like many consequences for Jesus in South Asian context. This story could be like many risks that a man is willing to take. But here we know that this reaching out to this woman is very important. Jesus is compassionate. He wants her to know the true Messiah, so he's willing. But it makes perfect sense that disciples are like, we don't know what this rabbi of ours is doing. Yeah.
What I like about that story is also the idea that it said, I must go through Samaria. Why? Because he has to. There is no other option for him. He has to break this, cultural issue or a cultural huddle. And you were talking about your cousin. Now I'm telling you, I have two sisters, and it was the same thing. When we are in the marketplace, I will not even talk to my own sister. Where our faces are very, you don't smile, your face is strong, because if anything, I look like a Pakistani Punjabi police officer who's like, just like has this face. And I understand what you're saying, and let alone talk to a woman who I have no connection with. And then third category, a woman of a particular reputation. That's even worse. I often think about in Lahore, we have this area called, it's in English, that would be Red District, right? By Data Darbar. Just to go in that area or think about, because every time we needed a musical instrument, tabla or dholak, we go there because they're really good. They're experts. So they make it. But going in that area is just such a huge taboo. And to me, that would be Jesus entering in that street. And not only entering, going up in one of those houses and ask, like, can I have a cup of water? What are you doing here? You see, that's like that kind of like interesting thoughts. That's amazing. As we come to, I want to start closing this time together. It's fascinating. I'm just so excited. What is the church in America missing or doesn't get when it comes to how the Psalms can be incorporated into everyday life?
Yeah, I think if I have to think of one thing, that'd be how to process grief and suffering, I would say. Sometimes I have heard this phrase from my American friends, is like, hey, you guys know how to process grief and pain and suffering. And there are, these are the things that we could actually learn from you. And I think the Psalms actually help us with that process of going through. So there is a saying that the rest of the Bible, God is speaking to us. In the Psalms, we speak to God. So there's a way of expression. We are expressing our weaknesses, our pain, our sufferings. So definitely, I think the Psalms help us to go through that, and that's probably one thing that I could think of that the church in America is missing.
Wow. I thought the other way around. I thought the American understanding, especially when it comes to like counseling, to me that was like brilliant. Those steps that you have to go through, acknowledging and going through. But that is a good perspective. I think that's how I dealt. Because when I think about Pakistan, no Christian, at least when I lived there, I never heard anybody taking their life because of depression. Not that they are not depressed, not that they are not going through suffering. I actually saw people fighting for life, not taking their own life, but fighting for it, even with their meager resources. They were able to somehow do that. So now I'm thinking about and connecting that. And I'm not talking about Muslim community. I'm talking about Christians how
Okay.
Christians deal with the grief. And sometimes it seems like all they got is grief and pain and suffering.
Sure.
Wow. On the flip side, how could singing the Psalms encourage other persecuted believers if they do not have the heritage of the psalmist in the same way?
Yeah. I well, these days I'm teaching a course on the global Christian persecution, and what I also see is pretty much it's the 1040 sort of window we are talking about, and many of these contexts are actually pretty much like oral cultures where there's so much of love and of love for poetry and so on. And I, yeah, I think scripture is the first place where you go, when you're going through persecution. But I also realize that, especially when you think about the persecuted churches, that there's a lack of material resources to help us go through like this process of persecution. There's a lack of like such materials. So for the church elsewhere, I would say, if whatever fits with their context, if they are much into Psalms, then go for Psalms, Psalms. But if there are other parts of the scripture that they're more familiar with, that brings them peace and courage and comfort and peace, go to the scripture like in the first place. So yeah, that would what I think
Good.
could do for the elsewhere for the persecuted church.
Maybe we can also sprinkle some of the counseling, Christian counseling, especially, because I do see the benefit of Christian counseling, which especially, not only suffering and pain, but also, dealing with marriage and morality and all those things too. Sometimes I think the marriages that I have seen in Pakistan they are there because they're never going to leave because culture enforces that. But at the same time, it's just damaging. You can see that those things. Before we close out today's episode, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I just want to say that I'm passionate about this thing. This work has really helped me to feel good about who I am, and I'm proud of my being a Punjabi Christian, and I'm proud of all the generations who have memorized these psalms and who have brought to us. And this is going from generation to generation. It's a beautiful heritage that we have. So yeah, I think we need to show more love and passion for this heritage, because it's our heritage. I was in Maryland this year, and there was a Christian convention happening, and some of these young Pakistani Christians who were born in America and who keep hearing their grandparents sing these Punjabi Psalms, or their parents sing these Punjabi Psalms. And when I went through like in detail about what these Psalms are and so on, some of these young people came to me, they said, hey, for the first time, you actually connected us to our roots. And they've never been to Pakistan, but this is their home, right? Their home environment is pretty much Punjabi culture. They are listening to these Punjabi Psalms. When they're going to churches, their grandparents, everybody is singing these Psalms. So it's a good feel that your work could be of benefit to the church, to the people.
Sure.
The Urdu version of the book will be available through the local Christian publisher in Pakistan, hopefully this summer. So that's I'm very excited. I mean, it was good about this particular book, but like how many people in Pakistan could actually have access to this? So I was not super excited about this one. And when it was like you have to order through Amazon, it's expensive. So it was very complicated, and I think I really feel happy now that it will be in the hands of the people who are connected to the Psalms, and it's part of who they are as Punjabi Christians, and this is their heritage. It will be in their hands. They can read about it, and so it all brings.
I agree. I mean, I just I tell you right now that it just gave me a new appreciation for Zabur, and just the word I have on my notepad is unique. It is unique. I mean, I am, my previous job, that's what I was doing. I was traveling a lot, going to any given year. I was going to so many different countries and sitting in those countries and listening to believers, which is beautiful, but same tune. This is that definitely it shows me too that Punjabi heritage, and by that I mean it does bring some level of pride being Pakistani Punjabi Christian, because it's not always the good thing. Every time when you think about Pakistani Punjabi Christian, you are thinking about untouchable, discrimination, have nothing to live on, and poverty and brick kilns and all that. But this kind of thing brings like, oh, God was doing something in the middle of all of that to create. So I hope and pray that the book may give that kind of awareness to even Pakistani people, Christian people, that they see it like, wow, we are holding something here so precious. Great that I'm just so happy. All of that was great. But before we the last thing I'm gonna ask you is to tell me a joke. But before that, if listeners wants to get in touch with you, what are the easiest ways?
Yeah, I think my email address, I'll provide my personal email address that maybe, if possible, you could provide in the description.
Sure.
My first name last name at hotmail.com. That's the easiest way. The other thing also, I try to maintain a Facebook page, which is dedicated to ID Shabazz in recognition of his contribution. So that's another way to connect with me through that page, which is dedicated for the Psalms. I'll provide the link, in which hopefully we could give in description.
Great. That will also be included in the episode's description. Now, the fun part. As I said, that I love closing our episodes with a joke, because sometimes we are dealing with heavy topic. Even in this conversation, we talk about discrimination, persecution. You are teaching a course on persecution. So persecution is real. People are being killed for their faith in Jesus. They are being persecuted. They are jobless, or whatever is going on. It's real. So heavy topics are part of this podcast. So this is my attempt to lighten the mood when I ask the speaker to tell us a joke. There's a purpose behind that. So please tell us a joke.
Sure. It's a very short one. Why do trains like bubble gum? They love to chew.
Why? They love to chew. You didn't wait for my why. Now it's a joke for real.
It's a joke for real.
Because you gotta pause. Why do they love? But I love this. Why do the trains love the bubble gum? Why? Because they love to chew. I love it. Yeah, that's my. So I'm gonna share that with my kids. They're gonna love it too. Thank you so much for being on the show again. That was Yousaf Sadiq. And thank you to all our listeners. We truly could not do this without you. If you learned something, have a topic suggestion, or would like to leave us feedback, drop us a note at oururbanvoices.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show and leave an honest review wherever you listen to your podcast. Tune in for more honest discussions from diverse voices.
You've been listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, which presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry.